Înainte să începem episodul, avem o ofertă promoțională, o ofertă foarte limitată, doar de Black Friday. Dacă folosiți linkul pe care îl veți găsi atașat descrierii și articolului acestui episod, veți primi 100 de euro pe care îi puteți investi în platforma Konvi. Deci doar dacă intrați pe linkul asociat acestui episod și pe articol, veți găsi acest link special pentru a primi această sumă în momentul în care vă înregistrați ca și utilizator nou în platforma Konvi.
Luxury handbags could be great investments. One specifically, Hermes Birkin, has been growing in value by 14% per year in the past 35 years.
Salut și bine ai venit la podcastul Banii Vorbesc, podcastul pentru educația ta financiară. Acesta este episodul numărul 15 din sezonul 5 și astăzi stau de vorbă cu Ioana Surdu-Bob, co-founder la Konvi. Ioana, thanks a lot for joining the Money Talks podcast and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we've met in kind of a weird way, and we'll get into that. But before we dive right into the kind of the main subject, I'd like me, but also the viewers and listeners to get to know you a little bit better. So let's start by going into your educational background, and then moving on to how did you get into entrepreneurship.
Perfect. So in terms of my educational background, I've very much have been into tech my entire life. I'd say my parents have influenced me a lot on that. Both of them are software developers. Well, not anymore, but they started their careers as software developers. So I always had computers around me. Of course, when I had to choose my high school, I guess that's the first choice that one does in life in Romania. I have chosen to go to a very competitive high school in Bucharest that very much focuses on computer science, and that is Tudor Vianu. And I'd say this high school definitely shaped me, given that everyone was very ambitious there. So I studied intensive computer science in there. And what I can say that I always found it easy to understand how it works. And I'd say that's also what shaped my future after that. Then I have left to university right after high school to the UK in Cardiff. And I studied computer science at Cardiff University. So it's a capital, the capital of Wales, but it's one of the smallest capitals in the world.
Okay, so that was high school going into university. You followed not just I guess your dream, but your passion to do this, to go into computer science and development. And then walk me through how you went from kind of the idea of, I have a job, or I'd like to have a job, towards I think I'd like to have something of my own, to grow something like a startup or a company.
Yeah. So initially, I'd say I didn't even think that I really want to work for myself, and I hate working for other people. I'm not that kind of person. But before Konvi, the jobs, education, or whatever I was involved in at the time were never enough. I was always attracted to create business ideas on the side. I don't know why. But for example, in high school, I tried to create an online store. I did create it, and this is where I also had my first sales from customers I didn't know before through the SEO. Then during university, I tried to focus a lot more on technical solutions that could actually scale. So I went to hackathons where I also got 2 awards at one of them, and even tried to create my first company in the UK, which is has now since been dissolved. But then also I started working full-time after university, and I've had before Konvi a company called Let's Stash, which was a marketplace for storage spaces, where we also had a few customers, but we weren't speaking German in the funding team. And this made growing the business very, very complicated. So this is where when the idea of Konvi came to us and to me as well, I knew we had a huge opportunity in front of us compared to Let's Stash, and this is where I stopped all the old initiatives.
Mm-hmm. So you were always you always had this spirit of entrepreneurship, building your own things, even from a rather early age. There was, so you went from Romania to UK in Cardiff to do the university education, but then as you do approximately now, you've moved on to Germany. How was that shift around the world somewhat?
Yeah, so I'd say the first part, moving to the UK from Romania, it was very much of a no-brainer for me. Weirdly, my parents never tried to set me back. On top of that, they even supported me to leave, and they told me I could get a better life abroad. I don't know if that's the case anymore, by the way. I think Romania is awesome, and I wouldn't really recommend all my friends to go abroad. But personally, I knew I would leave to study abroad when I was 16. So I prepared myself for that, did my exams. And then when I went there, it was just a new reality for me. So I never considered going back. Now, why I left the UK and came to Berlin, it all started with the first internship that I did when I was in university. The decision to go to Berlin was very much linked to my fiance and also my co-founder currently. He got an internship in Berlin first, and then I luckily also got another internship in Berlin. We didn't really have much money back then. And we imagined, what if we actually had a real job in Berlin? It would probably be awesome. We had a good life as interns, but probably it would be even better if we weren't. And this is what led to both me and Daran's decision to move back to Berlin when we finished university, and never regretted it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier about the idea of Romania being kind of more beautiful or having more opportunities once you've somewhat left it, let's say, behind you. And I wanted to kind of get more of these ideas from you, because I feel there's for a while there's this trend of young people kind of either leaving Romania to go somewhere else because there's opportunities, or essentially staying here with through various opportunities and working for companies around the world. So what would you say to, I guess, young people maybe still in the university right now in Romania, thinking about, hey, I should definitely leave the country because there's nothing to do here?
I think it depends on what they're studying and what they want to do. There's definitely more opportunities in certain areas in other countries. So, for example, if you want to be in film, I mean, in Hollywood, it's the best. But when it comes to the industry that I'm in, tech, I'd say there's a lot of opportunities in tech in Romania, and companies are growing in Romania. Now, it depends also what type of work you want to do. The reason why I never considered going back to Romania was that even when I started my career, I didn't feel like there was enough innovation by Romanians, because Romanians working in tech were mostly focusing on earning money from abroad, and fulfilling the dreams of other people. While I wanted to work for a product company that fulfilled the dream of the company, and I could push towards that. But that's changing. We've seen more and more startups in Bucharest. We've seen the success of UiPath, the first IPO, and we've seen that people can do really well here in tech. Now, I won't lie, there's fields that are not doing so well in Romania, but I'm sure that trying, like at least if you feel that you're tied to Romania, you shouldn't leave just because you think there's no opportunities. At least try to find some job opportunities that you would maybe be happy with.
You mentioned a few questions back the idea of your parents supporting you and believing in what you wanted to achieve. I was curious around this idea of financial education, whether from your parents or grandparents, generally from your family. What kind of financial education did you have growing up?
Personally, I think I was very lucky on this. My parents have always cared about their finances, maybe in different ways than I do now, but they did. And they cared a lot about saving, but also investing in different ways. So even though we have different views right now, they have influenced me nevertheless. And they taught me many basics that most kids don't even know about saving and investing when they get to university. So the first thing that I'd say I'm really grateful for them teaching me is why we should save and how to do it. I don't know how they taught me that, to be honest. I hope I'll be able to teach that to other people in the future, but they clearly embedded it in my brain because my sister has a very similar behavior of saving. So I always track my finances. I always knew how much I have to spend in order to not become in debt, etc., etc. And going to debt, maybe that's also one of the reasons that my whole family is super careful about that, is the fear of my whole immediate family of going in debt. So I've been taught from a very, very young age how debt works, how interest works, how being in debt with a high interest is bad, and how it can eat up my future, and that I should never do it. Now, of course, afterwards, I've learned there's good debt and bad debt, but that's another topic. And I'd say the other thing that they have showed me through the decisions that they have made when they were young is how making a sacrifice to invest now can really make up a huge difference in the future when it comes to the quality of life in general and potentially financial independence, which personally I am aiming for.
There's this saying that nobody ever got rich by just working at a company. Essentially, considering the let's say the low to medium wages, if you're not working in maybe in a Fortune 500 company, having the luck to have maybe shares in the company, there is this. It's no longer a desire. There's this actual need to do something else outside of work, and there's this large concern in Romania in regards to people that are young, maybe in their 20s or 30s, that they will not have a pension at the end of the 65 years because there will not be enough revenue essentially going in, or it will be such a small amount that it won't even matter. So you're essentially preaching to the choir. I'm highly invested, and we're all trying, all the people that are working towards building this podcast and the project surrounding it, to spread this idea of early financial education, that it does wonders. As you said, it does pay off in time. You do need to make some small sacrifices early on to essentially live better long term. So there's this element of computer science that you're highly invested in, and then there's this element of financial education that, again, early on you've had this education from your parents, a good education on this side, and then they all kind of blend together in Konvi. So I wanted to get to essentially the core of the discussion and ask you, what is Konvi?
Yeah. So Konvi, I'd say in a word, in a sentence, is the investment platform enabling anyone to partially own alternative assets such as luxury watches, fine wine, and many more other asset classes in the future. But although some people may find the concept interesting, cool, I'd say the new investors in any field of investing may still need a bit more background about why alternative assets are attractive. So here it is. So besides alternative assets proving healthy returns, they also perform differently than traditional investing methods like bonds, gold, stocks, making them great for diversifying any financial portfolio. So I'd say diversification is a big factor that when we're talking about good financial education with my parents. This is something that hasn't been so widely spread in the past years, in the past decades, but it has become more and more clear about how not putting all eggs in one basket is very, very important. So what is great about alternative assets is that it does not perform in a similar way to the stock market. It is uncorrelated to other investing methods. So it's a good way to hedge against the market and to reduce risk through diversification. Now, the problem with alternative assets is that it's only the high net worth individuals, the wealthy, who have been able to access such investment opportunities. And that is because alternative assets like 100,000 euro watches are really scarce. You cannot really find them or access them. And besides that, they're really expensive. But that's where we thought we can help, and we can help democratize this market, so we can allow anyone to invest into alternatives. So we have created a crowdfunding platform that allows our customers to invest in assets that are sourced by specialists. So, for example, Watch Fund was a great track record managing 60 million in assets for high net worth individuals. And besides that, the returns are really, really attractive. So we are looking at 20% per annum appreciation, higher than index funds, for example, on average. And our partners take care to store, insure assets. And for our customers, we want the experience to be seamless. They just sign up, they find the best opportunities that they want to invest in, and then they can finalize their process to become shareholders and co-owners of these items in a couple of minutes. The record is 4 minutes up to date.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to unpack, because it's, as you said, we're dealing with alternative assets. It's not something that I know that exists in Romania, and as we've talked before the discussion here, there's very few platforms that are doing this kind of globally, worldwide. So you are, in essence, innovators in this space. So one of my first questions would be: is it correct to say it's a fintech, or would you classify it as an investment platform? Where would Konvi be?
I'd say that we are a fintech because to date we are not sourcing the investment opportunities. So we kind of aggregate. Our scope is to become the one-stop shop platform for alternative assets. And how our business model works is, we believe that in order to find the best opportunities, but also to find variety, we need to rely on experts. And this is where I mentioned watch fund, cult wines for wine, that and many other more in the future are able to really use their experience and find the best opportunities. And I'd say what is difficult about our business and why I consider us being a fintech is because it is so hard to make this work at scale, and that's why people haven't really thought of doing it until now. But luckily we are in a good time where regulation allows us to also standardize this around Europe, but this requires a lot of tech to make sure that we can automate processes and allow people to own fractions of very expensive items.
So as I mentioned kind of earlier at the beginning of the discussion, we met kind of in kind of a weird situation. So before we got to know each other, I actually found the app. I can't say I remember where, and I immediately got it. I said, okay, I understand what this is. It's the digitalization of assets, luxury assets in this case, because I was aware of it. I was aware of the concept of doing this for real estate, so buying shares or buying co-ownerships, parts in real estate all around the world, which I found that was very interesting because all of a sudden, and as we've seen with the whole pandemic, especially with the quarantine in 2020, um, we are starting to see that we are to understand much faster than we are a global society. And so having, because I was thinking about my own experience. If I have, let's say, $10,000, $20, 50,000 euros that perhaps I like to invest in real estate, I'll continue with this example. Would it make more sense to invest it somewhere else where it has a better yield? I don't know, because I haven't really checked. I assume that there are, and I've seen examples of platforms that do such a thing. Then when I found Konvi, I was like, well, maybe I don't need to spend that much to have a great return. As you've said, could be 20%. And I've been involved with platforms that were doing similar things, but strictly regarding artworks. And then due to regulations, because these can change, obviously, they were kind of restricted to the US only. So I was kind of, I couldn't invest anymore. But again, I could become part owner in like a Banksy, which was incredible. The things that you could do all of a sudden, that things are getting digitalized. It's not, the way I say it, it's not just, oh, I could invest and it's this maybe a slightly better yield. It's this whole world of new opportunities. How did you get the idea for Konvi? So you knew about, you talked about, oh, there's these luxury items, only the wealthy essentially have access to them. How did you kind of connect these elements? And then obviously it's a full working product. I can, full disclaimer, I've invested within the platform before we met each other, and I can attest it's a very seamless process. So how did you get the idea for it? And then moving on towards, how did you actually get to the build that we have, that we can actually install and use on our phones?
Yeah, just a quick side note. I also want to say thank you for first being open to connect. It's really cool to hear how you found the platform and how you found it interesting, because you're exactly the profile of an early adopter that we hope for. And it's really interesting to see that you already knew about art, and you have invested in art. When personally, when I came up with the idea, I didn't know about any other platform in the space out there. But of course, I found out with time all the competition that is in this space. But when it comes to the idea that we had, it came up in the middle of the pandemic, right after the very slight crash in March 2020, where we have started taking having more attention. All of us founders in the Konvi team have started to see how important it is to have a diversified portfolio. We were very active regarding investing, but also taking care of our personal finances. Where Eran and I initially discussed about alternative ways to invest our money. I was personally looking into crypto, P2P loans. So I'd say you are also very familiar with all these methods. I mentioned in a conversation that luxury handbags could be great investments. One specifically, Hermes Birkin, has been growing in value by 14% per year in the past 35 years, which, of course, at first sight, it sounds crazy. And that was the reaction. He said, oh, this is just a way to justify purchases. So then I and also the other co-founders, Lena, our third co-founder, we started researching and found out that there's this whole world, as you mentioned. We realized that high net worth individuals have invested in alternatives for hundreds of years through auctions and very enclosed gatherings. And the assets, the range can be so varied: art, wine, watches, handbags, name it. So basically anything where the supply is lower than the demand can grow in value. And this is why we also started thinking how we can bring this to everyone. We were worried that we may not be the best to find the best opportunities in this space. So this is where, along with Lena, our third co-founder, we've built partnerships with experts like Watch Fund and Cold Wines. So we actually found the opportunity by just thinking that people should know about this. People should even know that this is something that they can do. I didn't know that I could do this, but now when we see that there's many risks associated with investing, I think people should know that the wealthy people can do a lot with their money that we cannot do yet. And that's why I think democratizing alternative assets is really important towards people wanting to improve their financials.
Mm-hmm. So some naysayers might think, oh, there's been the economic, as you said, the slight economic crash. People have lost their jobs. Maybe some have not even recovered them yet. Some people had to kind of do different things to simply survive. And you're out here talking about luxury goods. Like it seems antithetical to what a kind, I don't know, like an adapted startup would think of becoming or doing in a moment of crisis. So then you kind of took at least from my perspective, the alternative route and say, well, what are kind of the principles in terms of investing that have not changed since, as you said, hundreds and hundreds of years? These are not, it's not like you could replace the let's say the luxury watch with like gold or paintings or things that have existed for centuries essentially, and they stood the test of time for a reason. The same with like stocks. People talk like to talk crazy things about crypto because it's only been 5-10 years since the let's say the Bitcoin white paper, and have the space has been so ignored. So I wanted to kind of get into your headspace when the whole team discovered that this could actually become a real thing, turn it into a business and say, oh, this is not just a thing that comes up and poof, it's gone. It could realistically, and it is a global thing. What were your thoughts back then and at the start of it?
So for me, it just seemed a no-brainer because we want attractive returns, and we want also to reduce as much risk as possible. And when I was looking at certain assets, they actually seem to resist quite well when it comes to financial crisis. So for example, I can give an example of watches, Rolexes, which we don't put on Konvi yet, but you can see that during the financial crisis, they stagnate, and then they grow in value. And this is where the averages are still good. But it just seemed like a very attractive way to invest, given that it's not affected by crisis the same way. So while personally I thought that this is a great idea and I want to be part of it, I also knew that we needed to test and see if people would actually want to buy this. So this is also Lena that joined us maybe very shortly after we came up with the idea. Lena joined us, and she comes with a marketing background. She was a startup strategy lead at Facebook before Konvi, and she knew how to figure out if there is a market for this. So we tested out with the landing page, and we saw that people were signing up and they were interested. We did some researches, and while we found that many people don't know about this, if they were offered the information, they would actually really like to invest in alternative assets.
Mm-hmm. And I think I've heard something from another interview that you've looked at geographies, and some are more interesting. You got more results from certain countries than others. What is kind of the range in that? What did you see doing that?
Yeah, so that was a result of performance marketing experiments. And we've seen that Italy, France, and Germany are most responsive to this idea. And we believe that is due to education, because many fashion houses come from these countries. Wine, if you're thinking about it, is very much French. And then there's Italian handbags, and also cars as well, German, Swiss watches. So people rely more, like they try to make the connection much easier when it comes to connecting a physical good with something that can really appreciate in value, because they've heard stories. So this is where we've seen that the lowest acquisition costs comes from these countries, purely because of education. But I do believe this market will grow, and since we allow anyone from the EEA region to come to the Konvi app, we will see more and more interest from other countries, and I hope that Romania as well.
Mm-hmm. So even though we've like slightly met each other and we've set up this discussion, I don't want it to all be like a lowball question. So I really think that listeners and viewers have questions, innate questions. And one would be that you've kind of already answered, but I'd like for you to clarify a bit more. So when a luxury watch goes in the Konvi platform, in the Konvi app, does Konvi itself own that luxury watch, or does it own it after the whole crowdfunding process has ended?
Yeah, so Konvi never touches the assets that we put out on the platform. How it works, we create legal entities, companies, whose whole purpose is to purchase, manage, and sell assets. We have designed these companies to be self-sustainable. So we don't own these companies as Konvi.
And then, so these are real physical assets. They're not like the metaverse version of these. They're not NFTs. They're actually, in this case, like there is an actual watch somewhere.
Yes.
This company owns and holds.
Yeah, so we actually never hold our items even so far. We are partnering with, first we have a supplier, but we're also partnering with other experts that can also store and insure these items. So it's not like these items will be even held in anyone's hands so they can destroy a very expensive watch. They are going to be in a safely protected.
Mm-hmm. Are these items authenticated? I believe more so in the luxury and premium space. There's this whole issue of fake items, coming about clones. Do items come with it like a authenticity form proof? Can people check that out and say, "Oh, I'm actually investing in a, let's say, for example, in a Rolex"?
When the people are investing in Konvi, we are sending the money directly to the legal entity. Well, we are like the customers are sending the money directly to the legal entity, and then when the money is gathered, the item is bought. So we can only supply a certificate after the item is bought. But how it works, the partner, for example, watch fund, in the case of watches, they purchase the item, first of all, in most cases new, directly from the manufacturer, so that reduces part of the risk. But besides that, we also have another external party that authenticates the item. So we'll have an authenticator that will offer proof that the item is real, and we of course share that with all of our customers. And also we will share any information in the meantime after the item is being bought about their RRP, the recommended retail price, and also how that develops on the secondary market, if we can find information on that.
Mm-hmm. So the idea of these kind of larger than usual returns is based on the initial purchase price and then the price that the product can be sold for, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then who are the buyers? Are there other like companies, or are they specific people, like just wealthy people who just purchase the item for like a premium?
Yes, so to my knowledge, it's mostly wealthy people.
I was wondering, no, it was just the idea of how do these returns materialize in case of stocks. You just sell the stock, for example, or get dividends. It's kind of clear how you make the actual money. I was curious in terms of, okay, I've invested a sum of money. The watch in this case has been purchased. Further down the line, I assume it gets sold, and so I'm no longer a co-owner, but I do get my return plus the premium, let's say, and then I can move on to another product in the platform, because, like, for example, with stocks, I can get dividends, but I still own the actual stock,
Yes.
or I can buy shares of the stock. But in this case, it's kind of the more of a more of a simpler transaction. I purchase a co-ownership part, the product gets sold, I get the initial investment plus something on top, and then that's kind of the end of that's how me as an investor make money through Konvi, right?
Yes, exactly. And it would imply that all our investors come back and they put the returns in other opportunities that we have on the platform. But we do hope that in the future we have some auto investing capability that we can set up.
Mm-hmm. And then what are some of the risks involved? You've mentioned with the kind of a crash of the markets in 2020 or late 2020. Obviously, you still own the stock. You believe that Coca-Cola, for example, will bounce back. It's I guess centuries old company. What happens in this scenario? Let's say the crowdfunding goal for a luxury watch is 100,000 euros, and then it's set up. Is it set up on a time base? Like, is it like a few months, and then if it doesn't meet that goal, something happens, or is it like unlimited, where you just have to wait until it matches that threshold of 100,000 euros?
Yeah, so currently we have fixed appreciation periods that are range between 2 to 10 years. Now, as with every investment, I have to mention that there is risk associated to it. And Konvi is a medium risk investment, same as stocks. Now, when it comes to the item not realizing returns when it's sold, our partners actually work with fixed time periods. Watch fund has watch fund has actually never seen negative returns from the items they sold, purely because the items are so rare and there's always someone wanting to buy them. But of course, you can never rely on past returns when it comes to the future. So all we can show is past data, and of course, take your decisions based on that.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, again, kind of making a comparison to the stock market. You're looking and saying, oh, look, the S&P 500 has all this history behind it. It's had an evolution, not necessarily always been growing, but it has an evolution that you could track. Are there similar things on other platforms, or could we expect to see similar charts within Konvi and say, oh, similar products of this category have appreciated by this much, and have the actual kind of stats to back it up?
It very much depends on the asset class. So, for example, when we are looking at wine, there's a lot more wine being produced every year than luxury watches over 100,000 euro. So when it comes to wine, we can actually rely on an index that tracks the prices of wine. And there's other indexes for other asset classes, like even comic books, for example. And that can be used for watches. I'd say we are pushing a lot more the performance of the supplier, because when we are looking at very rare items that are only produced in 5 pieces, there are so few that are being sold that we aren't always going to have the up-to-date data. But whenever we have it, we will show it.
Mm-hmm. So Konvi started early 2020. It's been more than a year now. How's the business doing? What stage is it in? Is it raising funds? Is it growing? Are you hiring? Do you have a large team? What's kind of the general idea for the business at the moment?
So I'd say it's both growing and raising funds. I'd say our business must be growing in order for us to raise funds, but then to raise funds at attractive conditions, we must be raising when we don't need it. We have just gotten a group of investors on board, but we don't plan to be sharing it publicly right away. Especially not the amount yet, but I can say that one of our investors, which this is public information already, is APX, which is an early stage VC fund by Axel Springer and Porsche. And we also plan to expand to the wine market. This is where, in preparation, we have already started accepting pre-orders for our first wine offering with the cold wines. And maybe should I mention also our Black Friday offer, or we'll cover that separately?
Yeah, so there is a Black Friday offer, and we will have all of the details and the promo code in the description for this episode. But go ahead, tell us more about this Black Friday offer.
So we are actually, for Black Friday, we are doing a very limited offer where we are offering everyone €100. We want to incentivize the world to build up for a better future and financial independence. So we want to help people invest in themselves and their future by offering €100 whenever their friend invests on Konvi. So how it would work is you would refer your friend through a unique personal code, and then your friend will actually also see €100 in their starting balance. And if they choose to use it, once they finalize their order, you also receive €100 in your discount balance in your Konvi portfolio. And that's again for a very limited period of time. So that will be decreased to 10 very soon after Black Friday.
Mhm. We will have all of the details for this in both the article and the description for this episode. I really like the idea. You've mentioned it to me before. I do agree that it's not just us Romanians, it's everyone. We tend to spend more and splurge in terms of Black Friday. And it's fine. I think it's fine to some degree. If say you find a good deal on something, but as you've mentioned, at least in the financial education world, in the investment world, you would more likely want to find a good investment than that grows in time, uh, rather than essentially spend it and sink it. Like maybe you would get some pleasure from it for a few days or weeks, but then totally forget about it.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
don't get me wrong. I have a budget for pleasure, but I have a separate budget for investing. So I am still spending something on Black Friday, but I
yeah.
limit it to a certain amount. And that also makes me feel better that I'm not just throwing away everything and not thinking about my future.
Yeah, so let's not make spending the villain. But also let's not forget about the opportunities of investing. And my kind of follow-up question, going more into kind of a general view, I was interested in what we could expect for Convi in the next few years. You've mentioned the idea of kind of other asset classes. What else could we see in the app?
Yeah, so one very important point that we want to tackle next year is a liquidity solution. So by the end of next year, we would like to have an option for our customers to get access to funds earlier than the fixed appreciation period that I mentioned is 2 to 10 years. Currently, realistically, 3 to 5. Which is, I'd say, more than the average individual is ready to hold their money. But also our goal is to make the experience of our users seamless on the app. So we are focusing a lot on understanding what our customers need. So for example, you mentioned that you would have liked to have a crypto wallet to purchase directly in crypto, Convi investment, and this is definitely something on our radar. And thank you for your feedback. And we will be listening closely on making the experience better, and also showing our customers that if they are a co-owner, it's something that even though they don't really physically own the asset, is something they can be proud of. So we'll try to picture, say that, to have the pictures of the item all the time, and show data about the items and how they are developing in the market, etc.
Mm-hmm. Finishing up, I just have a few more questions for you. One would be in terms of the businesses that you are looking at, or industries. What makes you excited for the future? Maybe it's electric cars, or space travel for tourists. Are there certain things that you look at and say, oh, these are maybe not so interesting or not so well developed at the moment, but they will be huge in the next few years? Or as I've mentioned, like with electric cars, they're everywhere, but maybe they need some specific tweaks to get them to the next level. So what are the businesses or the industries that gets you excited for the future?
Actually, I found electric cars very interesting. Fun fact, when I was in my first year of university, I won that hackathon with the electric car project. We mapped all the electric chargers in the world. And people loved it, even though no one had electric cars back then. But I'd say the one thing that interests me about this world is economies of scale. I just find it amazing how a tech product can reach to and help so many people just because a small group of people have found a formula to automate something. So I'd say in general, in the consumer industry, we are seeing so many amazing things happening. I can give one example in the car space as well. Electric car share, like car sharing in general, but also electric car sharing. I just, can you imagine that 5 years ago we didn't have an option to rent a car by the minute? And now we do it all the time, and it's something that reduced my costs while increasing my quality of life. And I think we'll be seeing even more improvements in our quality of lives thanks to tech. And this is also why I'm so excited of being part of this industry. And in general, in the investment industry, well, this is what I think about all the time. Investments have just become more and more accessible to the broader population. So, a decade ago, it started with platforms like Robinhood, and they just democratized investments in stocks. And thanks to it, the whole industry just boomed. Thanks to it. And more and more financial instruments are being democratized these days. Like you mentioned, real estate, art is already an alternative asset, but loans as well. I just think that it's really great that alternative assets are part of this as well.
Mm-hmm. Two more questions. One is around UN Konvi. It's if people want to find out more, ask you some questions, maybe about starting their own entrepreneurship career, where could they find you online?
Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm generally accessible. And also, if you're curious to chat with me, if you just reach out on the Konvi app on the chat. We are not a huge team. We are only 6. If you speak, especially in Romania, it's gonna be me that's going to be answering. So feel free to reach out anytime. And the last question was about entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, so I was curious around the people that are not necessarily in Romania, but that want to be entrepreneurs, that maybe are in the university or have finished university, maybe they're working, and they felt this itch to as you've had, to start something for themselves, to work for themselves, to build something, to see it grow. What are your, I guess, best 3 pieces of advice for them?
Oh, I need to give 3. So, okay, the first piece of advice that I would have is to think about what type of entrepreneur you'd like to become, because there are so many different businesses that you could make. And if work-life balance is important to you, for example, I'd say don't start a VC-backed startup. And if having, let's say, a gradual growth of a business, maybe you can do anything that is either, say, online or not. So I'd say the best piece of advice is also what type, in terms of what medium would you want to be doing this business on? Do you want to do direct sales, or do you want to do a tech business, and do you want to do a business that is for customers or for businesses, and think about how that fits in your future in general. And that's where I have to say that not every successful business is VC backed. So we have committed at Konvi here to work on building the next big thing, like something that can not only grow all around Europe, but globally. And we are working around that every single day, and we cannot stop until we grow at a very, very large scale. If this is something that you don't want, then you shouldn't go for the VC route, and try to build a business organically. And there's, say, Amazon businesses that are very simple, or that can be very lucrative. Well, you know what you want to do. And if you don't know the idea, just try to research the market. I mean, there's so many places of inspiration, and it doesn't have to be the next innovative idea that no one has thought about, I'd say. And I'd say with the last piece of advice that I would say, do it if you really want to do it, and consider if your job is actually enough, because I have many friends that would say, yeah, I'd really love to start a business in the future, but they would not necessarily give up everything for it. And we have decided to take a very big step at Konvi to leave. For example, I left my job at Shopify, which was nice. I didn't hate it in any shape or form. I actually liked it. And I made this sacrifice along many others. And if you don't want to do this sacrifice, there's small side hustles that you can do, like a blog, for example, Instagram, whatever, that could say get your interest more than having to give up everything, basically.
Mm-hmm. Ioana, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. I feel like this is just the beginning for Konvi, and I hope to have you on the podcast next year, maybe with other asset classes, maybe with crypto, maybe who knows, because things at least in the startup world are changing so quickly. So thank you, and hope to hear from you soon next year.
Thank you, and thank you for the great discussion.
Acesta a fost episodul numărul 15 din sezonul 5 al podcastului Banii Vorbesc, podcastul pentru educația ta financiară. Ne auzim și ne vedem data viitoare!